Hello, welcome to the Brazilian Health Nut Show. Here you will find cutting edge information provided by the best experts in the world so you can learn how to burn fat for the rest of your life. Bruno de Gama is the Brazilian health nut in a mission to solve the problems you have when trying to lose weight forever. He is a nutritional therapy practitioner, a certified personal trainer, and a holistic lifestyle coach by the Czech Institute. Don't forget to say hello and sign up to our free newsletter at www.brazilianhealthnut.com. Let's go.
All right, thank you so much for being here with me today, Paul. I super appreciate your time. Can you tell a little bit about your background, your story, and how did you write the perfect health diet with your wife?
Well, my background had very little to do with health and diet. I was originally a scientist, an astrophysicist, and I got bored with science and decided to go into the business world. During the time of the internet boom, I helped start a software company, and I really enjoyed entrepreneurship, so I stayed, founded another company, and then became an advisor to some others. But as I got into my late 30s, my health, was having some health problems that seemed to keep getting a little bit worse every year, and I decided I'd better start tending to my health and figure out how to become healthy. And
What kind of problems did you start having? Like, did you start to gain weight, or was it more related to your mental health and like energy?
Yeah, it was more mental health. I started having memory loss. My mood. I had always been very happy, and what happened was I took a course of antibiotics when I was 29, a year-long course of antibiotics for acne, and it didn't fix the acne, but it did damage my health, and I think what happened is I got some kind of fungal overgrowth, and I started having fungal skin infections, oral thrush, and generally fatigue. My athleticism was greatly reduced. I was a runner, and my running times just kept slowing down. I developed hypothyroidism, and I started having memory loss and impaired mood. So my mood was very flat. It was like I couldn't feel happiness anymore, and I was a little irritable. And I knew this wasn't natural for me. There was something wrong. But when I'd go to the doctor and give these complaints, then he'd say, "Well, I don't recognize that as a disease, and I don't have anything I can do for you." And every year it would get a little bit worse. And every year I'd go back to the doctor and say, "Look, I have these symptoms," and he'd say, "Well, I don't recognize them." And so I think he thought I was a little bit of a hypochondriac or something. But I knew there was something real, and especially as the memory loss got worse, it was really hurting my productivity at work. So I was trying to write a book, and I started, I would forget what I had written in the previous paragraph. And
Were you writing already this book?
Not this book, a different book.
Oh, okay.
And this is when I really knew I had to start learning how to be healthy, because my mind is very important to me, and I was in my 30s, so I was too young to be losing my memory, and
Right.
so it really became important to me. But I didn't really know where to turn until I discovered the Paleo diet in 2005, and that seemed plausible to me, so I gave it a try. And it was the first thing I tried that really made a difference in my health and my symptoms. So some symptoms immediately got much better, and some symptoms immediately got worse. And so I experimented with it for quite a while, and over the first year, I gradually realized that I had developed some nutritional deficiencies on my implementation of paleo, and and I started repairing those, and I got a lot better. And then I realized if I had discovered a few things that I was deficient in, then there were probably a lot more nutrients that I was deficient in, and I should really do a systematic study of, how much do you need of each nutrient, and what food should you be eating in order to get those nutrients. And so that's what I started doing, and then it ended up taking 5 years for me to work my way through all of the nutrients and to stabilize on a good diet.
Did your wife also had some problems? How was this
Yes.
journey? Because she co-wrote the book, right?
Yeah, that's right. And she also had a number of health issues, hypothyroidism, digestive issues, acid reflux, fatigue, headaches, and various reproductive related issues. And so she had some issues. She was a little more cautious, so she let me do all the experimentation, and then when something worked for me, then she'd try it. But she was a really good partner because she did most of the cooking, and she was very supportive, very flexible, and willing to learn how to cook a different way, and let me actually pursue some of these experiments. And also, she's a biologist at Harvard, and so through her, I had access to all of the Harvard library subscriptions to journals, and that really made it much easier to do the research. Nowadays, a lot of journals have open access, but back in 2005, that wasn't the case. And so, and then we talked things over, and when she tried things out, we got a second data point on how people were affected. So,
so I'm sorry, I'm curious here. Then we're gonna get into the nitty gritty of all the nutrition and all on your book. But how did you go about? You're going through some challenges with your health, and then you try and you experiment new things to see if it's working, and then you're writing the book at the same time with your wife. How is this process of the book? I know it has nothing to do with health here, with losing weight, but I'm just curious about how did you guys do this together?
Well, I didn't start writing a book. I didn't start writing anything until 2009, except collecting notes. So I would collect.
So 4 years.
Yeah, so I was just collecting notes for the first 4 years and experimenting, and groping my way towards a better diet and more knowledge. And then by 2010, after 5 years, I started to feel like, all right, we had a really good handle on what a healthy diet was, and I'd done a good first pass through all of the nutrients, and I'd gotten a good idea of what the right amount was, and then translated that to foods, and we've been eating that way ourselves, and we've gotten good health results ourselves. So then we were getting really confident that even if we didn't have the whole story, we were very close to it, and at the same time, the generation behind me, my aunts and uncles, started coming down with a lot of health conditions of old age, and so I wanted to share what we'd learned. And so initially, I just wrote something up for family, just sort of a digest of what we'd learned and how you should eat, and that was like 40 pages or so. And then once that was written, then I decided, well, we should really expand it into a book, and should write a blog, start a blog. And so I started blogging, created perfecthealthdiet.com, and we chose the name not because we thought we had everything perfect at that time, but because basically one of the key things I had learned, strategically, is you should really try to aim for perfection, aim for getting everything right. And then even if you miss, you'll still be in a good place. And for us, that was, there's maybe 60 nutrients that we know about and have some idea what the optimal amount is. And so if you're making a diet that's trying to optimize 60 different things, and then we were also included in the book lifestyle advice, things like intermittent fasting, circadian rhythm entrainment. And, so there's more than 60 things that you're trying to optimize simultaneously. And, so we wanted a name that would get across that, you should be motivated to try and optimize many, many different variables. And there's no one magic bullet in health. You can't just take one thing, change it, and then your health will all magically get better. You need to give your body all of the inputs that it needs in order to maintain itself, repair itself. And that means, 60 different nutrients, 10 different lifestyle inputs. So you've got a lot of things that you need to tend to. And in order to be healthy, you need to have that attitude. I'm going to do all the little things. I'm going to seek perfection. And so we chose the name Perfect Health Diet because we wanted to encourage people right from the beginning that that's where they needed to aim.
Got you.
And so we chose that name, and we started blogging in 2010. We self-published an early edition of our book in late 2010. And over the next 2 years, I did a lot of blogging, like 3 or 4 blog posts every week. And I learned a lot doing research for those posts. And I also learned a lot of feedback from our readers. So our self-published book sold about 20,000 copies, and I had hundreds of readers send me feedback. And so we learned a lot from them. And after 2 years, we were ready to make a revised edition of our book. And that one was published by Scribner, a prestigious publishing house, and did very well. And we're really pleased with the quality of the diet advice in that second edition.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for writing that book with your wife. Actually, I read probably 4 years ago, I guess, and I still recommend to people. I still recommend to my clients as one of the best books if you just want to really get into the nitty gritty of nutrition and just how to be healthy. And this might be the hardest question here that I have for you, and you already touched a little bit on that, because I tell people that there is not one perfect health diet or one perfect way of living to be healthy. I think there is more than one way, and people are different. So, and how can you answer this question? Is there is one perfect health diet, or there is more than one?
Well, I think I would tend to disagree with you a little. I think the optimum for most people is pretty similar. There's probably some slight variations from individual to individual, but generally speaking, the big differences that people see between and how they react to foods are because of ill health. So when you're sick or something's wrong, then you can react quite differently to things. So if different people, if you have bad gut microbiome, you have infections in your gut, you can react badly to some foods that would be very healthy for another person. And in different disease conditions, you may want to tweak the diet different ways to have a stronger therapeutic effect against the disease. But generally speaking, I'd say healthy people will all do well with a very similar diet. Oh, I apologize.
Oh, that's okay. No problems.
So, in general, when we all have a similar body composition, and and some extreme lifestyles like elite athletes, they may adjust their nutritional needs a little bit because of their activity. But most people, they have a quite similar body composition, and and basically all of our cells and all of our body parts turn over on different time scales, but they all need to be reconstructed, rebuilt, and we eat in order to provide those ingredients. And our cells are designed to self-cannibalize. So they don't really, to generate energy, they don't really rely on food intake. They take proteins and fats and carbohydrates from within the cell, and they consume those. And then when you eat, they take in nutrients from the food and reconstruct themselves. The cells expand and regrow to the size they want to be. And so So really, uh, it's not that you are what you eat; it's that you need to eat what you are.
Yeah, I'm gonna ask you a little later about this chapter, this part of your book. It's really really nice. But before that, you start your book actually with a little bit about paleo perspective, right? Looking back into history, and why does it make sense for us to look back into the past to figure it out what we should be doing nowadays?
Yeah, well, the motivation for us to develop our diet, the original motivation, was based on the paleo argument that, look, if you look at how animals eat, if you look at how humans ate until pretty recently, 10,000 years ago, we hunted and gathered our food. So the only food was, living plants and animals. Uh, or recently living, that you may have killed a few hours ago. But you're basically eating all the parts of a living creature. And, uh, and that makes sense because we share an evolutionary history with plants and animals. And there's a lot of shared biology. Every living thing has DNA, has cell membranes, has proteins. So when we eat living things, we're getting the same ingredients that make up our own bodies. And that's a very natural diet. But if you go in the supermarket and you look at so many of the foods, especially packaged foods, you'll typically see, if you look at a cake or cookie or donut at the ingredients list, it's going to be starch, sugar, oil, and then flavorings. And so you're missing a lot of the ingredients that make up a human being. And so when you eat, we've now, with the advance of technology, we've learned how to create foods or things that strike us as foods that just don't nourish us the way natural whole foods do. That are based on plants and animals, and
leading us to malnutrition, right?
yeah, that's right, and also to obesity epidemics because the food producers make sure to give us calories, but they don't give us all the micronutrients that we need. And so our brain senses we don't have enough micronutrition and says, go eat to get more micronutrients. And we eat cookies and donuts, and we don't get any of them, but we're getting more and more calories. And that's why people eat excess energy diets. And that's why we've had a recent epidemic of obesity and diabetes. One of the reasons.
Yeah, I want to get it a little later also about this. You had an amazing talk on the Ancestral Health Symposium 2014 that I saw. It was really good. Cool. But before that, there is a lot of talk about vegetarianism and veganism nowadays, right? But on your book, you say that actually the consumption of fatty animal foods, that was what brought us here. Can you expand a little bit about the importance of fat coming from animals, please?
All right. Well, we need all of the macronutrients. So our body, cells. If you think of the structure of a cell, the cell membranes are all lipids. They're all fats, cholesterol, other molecules that are that come in fatty foods, and then proteins, and then carbohydrates make up cells, and especially the extracellular matrix that connects cells together. And so we need all of them, and we need them in balance. And our feeling, as a result of looking through the evidence, was that many people were under-eating lipids and fat-associated nutrients, and overeating carbohydrates a little bit. And so we recommended. So the average American eats about 50% carbohydrates and about 35% fats. And we recommended more or less flipping those, so it was about 35% carbohydrate and 50% fat. Every nutrient, it's good for you if you're eating too little of it, then it's good for you to eat more. And if you're eating too much of it, then it's good for you to eat less, and it's bad for you to eat more. And fats are no different. So so you always have to look at the value of fats in terms of the context of what people are already doing. And so we think a lot of people would benefit by adding some nutritious fatty foods, especially things that are micronutrient rich, like egg yolks. And so there's some reason to believe that people would do better to get more seafood, which has some omega-3 fats, among other nutrients, and a lot of good minerals and other nutrition. People would do well to eat more egg yolks. People would do well to eat more avocados. Coconut milk is a good source of healthy fats. Olive oil is good. A lot of nuts and nut butters. From cashew butter to almond butter to macadamia nuts, are healthy foods. So, people, the average person could stand to eat a little bit more of those. But then, some people in the paleo community who, went, we think, a little too low carb, also went...
They go a little bit overboard.
Yeah, went a little overboard on the fats as well. So, you can err on both sides. And, we have our recommendations that we think are well balanced.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. Hey guys, what's up? Bruno Gama here, Brazilian Health Nut, and let's take a little break from the show because I would like to offer you something. If you go to my website, www.brazilianhealthnut.com, and click on the page Burn Fat Forever, you can go ahead and claim your free consultation with me right now, okay? Or you can just send me an email at brazilianhealthnut@gmail.com. So you can start to lose weight and feel healthier right now, okay? So go ahead and claim your free consultation with me, and remember that spots are limited, okay? Now let's get back to the show. And one of my favorite chapters in the book was about the breast milk, what the breast milk can teach us about human diet, because before reading your book, I never really thought this way. Can you share a little bit about this chapter with us, please?
Yeah, well, we basically took two approaches to figuring out what's optimal for us. So one of them was, like I said earlier, the way we started. We tried to look at every nutrient and assess what's the optimum amount for every nutrient. And then once we had that, work backwards to what's a mix of foods that optimizes every nutrient simultaneously. But then we also wanted to look at evolutionary arguments. So, coming out of the paleo world, there was a simple evolutionary argument. We evolved eating a hunter-gatherer diet, and therefore we're evolved for that to be optimal for us, and we should eat that way. And that argument has a few problems, which some anthropologists have criticized, but it's a little bit vague about exactly how we should eat, because there's a lot of different hunter-gatherer diets.
Yes, different geography, right?
Yeah, that's right. And so, just that idea alone, I think it's correct that we should eat natural whole foods like a hunter-gatherer would, but that doesn't tell us enough. And so we wanted to look for other lines of evolutionary evidence. And one thing we know is that breast milk, must be the perfect food for infants, for human infants.
Must.
Yeah, because if it wasn't, and there was some other food that would make a healthier baby, then evolution would have selected to make that healthier breast milk, right? So it has to be perfect as long as the mother is well nourished enough that she can make a good breast milk. And, so looking at the composition of breast milk tells you a lot. And one of the things we noticed is that most animals, the composition of breast milk is very similar, and very similar to the composition of human breast milk. And that's telling us that animals really need a very similar diet to humans. And usually the main difference is that animal milks have more protein than human milk. But apart from that, the proportions are pretty much the same. And the reason for that is that humans have a big brain. Human infants, the brain uses about 70% of calories. And the brain needs almost all carbohydrates and fats. It really doesn't need much protein. And so human breast milk is low in protein, and animals with smaller brains have more protein. But other than that, milk composition is pretty similar, and it gives us a good idea of what the optimal diet is. And this gets back to the question you asked earlier: does the optimal diet vary between persons? And if breast milk is telling us that the optimal diet doesn't vary much between different species of animals and humans, then it probably doesn't vary much within the human race either. And
makes sense.
yeah, and now, so infants are a little bit different than adults. So, for instance, I mentioned that the infant brain uses about 70% of energy. In adults, it's only 20%. And so you have to adjust. So the optimal nutrition for a human adult is a little more similar to the optimal breast milk for an animal, like cow's milk, than it is to human breast milk. But the milk is still a good indication of how we should be eating. And breast milk is generally around 50% fat and around 30 to 40% carbs. So human breast milk is 54% fat by calories. So that gets back to what we said about us being a little bit more fat-friendly than the average American diet.
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you so much. And a lot of people say to eat, we are what you eat, sorry, but you say actually you should eat what you are. So what is that about? Because this is very interesting take too.
Yeah, well, that's what we mentioned that earlier.
Right.
People are really meant to be able to fast. And if you think of how hunter-gatherers lived, they had to go through enforced fasts fairly often when food was scarce. So if there's bad weather, or if all the animals have migrated away, or if you've overhunted an area, and then food will be scarce and you'll have to go find it. And it may take you a couple days to go, find a new food source. And, so fasting would be very common in our ancestral history. And it's very common for wild animals today. So wild animals, there's no refrigerators, there's no supermarkets, grocery stores on the corner to go get food whenever you want it. And animals often, have to go extended periods without eating. And that's normal, and it should be normal.
Yeah.
And our cells are designed to work that way. They're designed to cannibalize themselves, and then when you eat, everything regrows. But in order for that to work, you need to eat all the nutrition that your body needs to regrow. And if you're not doing that, then the body can't regrow, and fasting becomes very intolerable. It's very unpleasant. Whereas if you're eating well and you're well nourished, you can fast very easily and very comfortably. And
yeah, sorry to interrupt. That's one of the things that changed the most in my life once I started applying everything that I was learning, was the ability to go without food for a longer period of time. Because before I would get like on a bad mood right away if I didn't have food for, let's say, 3 hours. I get cranky and I had to have food. But nowadays, for example, I'm going back to New York City next week, right? I'm in Brazil right now, and I'm gonna be doing a 24-hour fast. And I can do that pretty easy nowadays, thanks to the nutrition that I have been applying throughout the last 4 or 5 years, right? So yeah, that's so true.
Yeah, and that's we noticed that, and our readers noticed that. All their hunger and cravings went away. People no longer wanted to binge eat. Fasting became very easy. You could fast for a long time and not get hungry, and that just means that's normal. That's what happens when you're well nourished, and most people are just not well nourished, and so fasting is very difficult for them, and that's really a sign that their health is not as good as it should be, because their bodies aren't able to maintain themselves as well as they should.
Yeah, cool. So let's get into the nitty-gritty of the diet. Let's see, how does the perfect health diet looks like in terms of more practical stuff, like food and ratio. You already mentioned a little bit about the carb to protein to fat ratio. Can you just expand a little bit more about?
Yeah, well, the way that translates into food is you want to have roughly equal proportions of starchy plants, sweet plants, low-calorie vegetables, and meat, fish, and eggs. All right, so basically think of splitting your plate into quarters, and one quarter will be meat, fish, and eggs, the animal foods. one quarter will be starches, things like potatoes or other tubers, or white rice. One will be sweet plants, so those would be things like fruit, carrots, beets, and then vegetables. And then flavor it with some healthy fats, some acids, things like vinegar, lemon juice, lime juice, um, and some stock, and some fermented, something fermented with umami flavor. So that would be like fish,
sauerkraut.
Yeah, fish sauce, soy sauce, anything fermented will have the umami nutrients, umami flavor.
What about the ratio and the carb to protein and fat?
Yeah, well, one thing people don't really realize is when you're working with natural whole foods instead of all these purified flours and starches, most of the weight of plant foods is water, and much of the rest is indigestible. Maybe fiber, other things. So you're not really getting a lot of calories. So our plate is 3/4 or more plant foods, but you're actually getting most of the calories from the animal food that you eat. And so, I think, there's the term plant-based diets. You could say our diet is a plant-based diet because it's, Michael Pollan says, eat mostly plants. And that's true for us, even though plants aren't providing most of the calories. So it's really about balancing the diet, and you need to eat mostly plants just because the plants don't have a lot of calories and don't have in order to get the right amount of nutrients out of plants, you need to eat make about 3/4 of your food coming from plants.
Yeah, in terms of weight, it's coming mostly from plants, but in terms of calories, it's actually coming from animal source because they are more rich in calories, like you said, especially fats, right?
Yep.
Gotcha. Cool. So I have two things here to ask you in terms of Brazilian culture, because one is going to make a lot of Brazilians happy and the other one very, very unhappy, okay? So the first one, let's start with the happy one. You actually recommend in your diet white rice. And I don't know, you came to Brazil before, and we eat a lot of rice here, especially white rice. So that's a good one. However, you don't really recommend beans in your diet. And we have the most famous meal we have here in Brazil. It's called feijoada. That's kind of like a festival with beans. So it's beans and a lot of meat and sausage and spices. And people eat a lot of beans here, beans and rice pretty much every day. So tell us about the beans and the white rice, Paul.
Yeah, well, so I said our diet is mainly about optimizing nutrition, but we also looked at the possibility that foods have toxins that can harm our health. And some foods really do seem to have some toxins that are harmful, like soybeans, for instance. So people who eat a lot of soybeans or soybean-based products like tofu have early cognitive decline. So they'll show cognitive decline at age 60. And they have more thyroid issues, they have more fertility issues, and some other problems. And so there's reason to believe from other foods that food toxins may be, a significant health issue. So probably not as important as being well nourished, but still you may be able to improve your diet by reducing toxin content. Now the good thing is that for a lot of foods, cooking destroys the toxins, and that's the case with white rice. So rice has some toxins, but they're generally completely destroyed in cooking. Especially if you use a pressure cooker.
Yeah. Why do you recommend? Sorry. Why do you say white rice instead of brown rice? Because especially here in Brazil, a lot of people, I'm eating healthy, I'm eating brown rice, and I always recommend the white rice. And I would love to hear your opinion about that.
Yeah. Well, that again, gets to the issue of what do we need and what do we want to avoid. So the bran of the cereal grains, that's where they put the toxins. So the plants put toxins there aimed at suppressing digestion because they're expecting animals, especially herbivorous animals like cows and horses and so on, will come eating their seeds. And then they want to suppress digestion so that the seeds survive, and they go out with the manure and make a new plant. And so the seeds have those toxins. They also have, they're hard for us to digest. They're meant to be indigestible by mammals, and so they provide some fiber for gut bacteria. Gut bacteria can do a little bit better at digesting them. And so one issue is the fiber beneficial, and are the toxins harmful? And we generally recommend avoiding cereal grain toxins, cereal grain bran, just because the toxins are directed at mammals, because mammals are the animals that eat cereal grains in nature. And, so just to be safe, we recommend removing the bran. And that's what manufacturers do when they make white rice. And brown rice has the bran. The same issue comes up with the beans. So if you dehull the beans, so you take the skin off, most of the toxins are in the skin, then that improves their healthfulness. And the other issue with the beans, they have a lot of these toxins. They have a lot of these digestive inhibitors. Now with the beans, if you prepare them well, then the toxins will be destroyed.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you, because here, the way they prepare this meal, the feijoada, and just beans in general, they soak overnight. Like my mom here, she's cooking some beans actually right now. And she soaked overnight, and then she's cooking for a lot of hours on a pressure pot.
Yeah.
So it's like a whole preparation. But if you go to especially in the United States, you just can buy those beans on a can, and I totally agree. I would never eat that.
Right. And all traditional cultures, India, all traditional cultures that eat a lot of beans, they all do that soaking the day before, and then they have long cooking times. So traditional Indian cuisine, they'll soak for a long time, and then they'll have the pot boiling for hours. And pressure cookers are even better at removing these toxins. But nowadays, we're all about speed, and the factories are all about speed. If you think of how can a factory make money, if you have to soak the beans for 12 hours and then you have to cook them for 3 hours, they're not going to make a lot of money. They need a lot of machines, a lot of real estate to get the beans through. Whereas if you can cook them in 5 minutes, then you can move a lot of beans through the factory, and it's much cheaper. And that's what they do. So, the industrially produced beans are just not going to destroy the bean toxins, and the result is that the food is probably not so healthy for us.
Interesting. Yeah, very nice take. Another curiosity here: why do you recommend having a little more fish and ruminants and less chicken and pork? Comparing one to the other, right?
Yeah. So, basically, we think people get way too much in the way of omega-6 fats.
Okay.
And omega-6 fats cause a lot of health issues. And chicken and pigs, if they're fed a high-grain diet, so if they're living in the wild, then they'll tend to have relatively low omega-6 levels. But in general, any animal, when you make it obese, it gets more omega-6 fats. And that's especially true with pigs and chickens. And food producers do try to make their pigs obese, before slaughter. And so you tend to get pretty high omega-6 levels in these animals. And we recommend that people try to keep their omega-6 intake down to 3% of calories. And that's easy to do if you're eating fish, shellfish, beef, lamb, because all of those have the omega-6 fat levels are about 3% of calories. So if your foods have 3% of calories, then your diet as a whole is going to be 3% of calories or less. But pork, if they fatten up, if they put the pigs on an all-grain diet and they fatten them up, make them obese, then the the pork fats will be 30% omega-6. And, you know, meat is a quarter of our diet. And, you know, in terms of bulk, and if that meat is 30% omega-6, then, you know, you're quickly going to get way over 3% of your whole diet. You know, now if you could eat naturally raised pigs that, you know, were fed on natural foods, then they'd have much lower omega-6 levels, and you could eat them more often. But we generally recommend for the typical supermarket pork or chicken, you know, keep that down to 1 day a week or so.
Yeah, I do the same. Thanks to you. I learned from you this one. So let's get into a little bit about the obesity epidemic. And like I told you before, you had an amazing talk on the Ancestral Health Symposium 2014. And I know that was a long talk, like probably almost 1 hour, where you talk about malnutrition, circadian rhythm disruption, infections, and disrupted gut microbiome as well. So I know you don't have much time here left, but can you give a little bit about a summary from this talk and in terms of obesity, really what's going on today in the world?
Yeah, well, the main point of the talk is I presented some evidence that, you know, in obesity, just like other health conditions, there's no magic bullet. You know, there's no one variable that caused the obesity epidemic to happen, and that's why, you know, nobody's come up with a magic bullet cure. You know,
Yes.
just eat this or don't eat that, or, you know, do this, don't do that, and obesity goes away.
Yes.
In reality, there's a whole bunch of factors that promote obesity, and many of those factors are new. You know, so we've radically changed the world in just the last 100 years. So we've created a lot of new technology. You know, just think like artificial lighting. You know, like Thomas Edison invented the light bulb, you know, like I don't know, 130 years ago. And,
Yes.
You know, but artificial lighting, we didn't have street lights at night. You know, we didn't light up our homes until, you know, maybe 50, 60, 70 years ago. In most places, we didn't have televisions, you know, until 50, 60, 70 years ago. And, you know, now what do people do? They have these bright white lights on until they go to bed at 11 p.m. and they're watching television, which has a lot of blue light. And it's a totally unnatural environment, because our natural environment, we'd have a 12-hour day with bright light, and we'd have 12 hours of night, and the only light we'd see would be campfires and candles, you know, that give a very reddish, yellowish light. And it turns out reddish, yellowish light is very supportive of nighttime rhythms, and our bodies evolved to need like a 12-hour nighttime. And we're no longer giving it that. We're now, you know, taking 16 hours for daytime, and then we go to sleep. And, you know, we hope to, you know, just let our sleep be our nighttime. And that doesn't work very well for our bodies. And that's actually a major cause of obesity.
Yeah, I was talking to Ben Greenfield yesterday actually, and we talk a lot about this, the circadian rhythm, you know, and he gave a little lesson on that. It was awesome. Yeah, so important. Also, my neighbor here, I was talking to him, and he's the original here on the street where I live, and his grandfather was the first one. So that's like, I don't know, 60, 80 years ago. And he was talking exactly what you just said. He would go to bed around 9 and wake up at 5, 6. You know, he was just using some lights from candle lights and just relaxing before going, not because there was no artificial lights.
Yeah, and, you know, in the same way, you know, we'd have to walk to get around, and you know, now we drive automobiles, and so we get less exercise. And there's all kinds of changes that have, you know, promoted the obesity epidemic, and they all kind of conspire together. And so it's really important to bring more of that ancestral mindset. And, you know, so you don't have to give up the benefits of modern technology, but you do have to figure out how to adjust your life so that you're living it a little more in accord with our ancestral heritage and you know, what our bodies evolved to expect from our environment.
What about infections and disturbed gut microbiome? Can you tell just a little bit about what is that?
Yeah, well, microbes have a big impact on our health and our behavior, and it's well established now that the gut microbiome really has a big effect on weight. And in mice, for instance, you can take the gut microbes of an obese mouse and you put them into the digestive tract of a lean mouse, and the mouse becomes fat. And you take the microbes from a lean mouse and put them in an obese mouse, the mouse becomes slender. And so, microbes have a really big influence on us. And one of the things that's changed is we've made our environment much more hygienic. Uh, and so germs used to be really virulent. They'd be good at causing disease. They'd be good at causing diarrhea, sneezing, all kinds of things that would help them spread to other people. And nowadays we're so hygienic, it doesn't do a germ very much good to cause diarrhea if all the diarrhea is going into the toilet and it gets flushed away and all the germs get killed. So if they're not, getting spread to another person, then it doesn't do them any good to cause those symptoms. So instead, they no longer create acute disease. Instead, they create chronic conditions like obesity, and so they multiply within your gut. They induce you to eat more food, and there's also been changes. People eat fewer fermented foods. They eat less fiber, so they have less diversity in their gut microbiome, and that has an impact. That they're also maintaining the gut less well. That makes them more vulnerable to getting infections in the gut, and inflammation promotes obesity. So adipose tissue is an immune organ. When immune cells in the gut sense an infection, then some of them go over to the adipose cells, and they induce the adipose cells to release inflammatory cytokines, which stimulate the immune system to go attack the infection. And when the adipose cells are doing that, they'll also tend to grow and proliferate. So you get more fat if you have a chronic infection that you need to deal with. So as our germs have evolved away from acute diseases, acute infections, to creating chronic infections, and our adipose tissue is an immune organ designed to help us fight chronic infections that are hard to make go away. And as we've gotten a more inflammatory gut and inflammatory gut microbiome, that's also promoted obesity. And so there's a lot of things people can do to improve their diets, improve their immune function. Simple lifestyle things like intermittent fasting, it really helps to clear bad germs out of the gut. And, so that gets back to what we said. If you're eating a good diet, then fasting becomes easy. And then it's much easier to do it, and then the fasting will pay a lot of dividends.
Yeah, there is a lot of research coming out now about the importance of gut microbiome. So I think it's the future. Cool. So Paul, can you please share with us a little bit about your Perfect Health Diet Retreat, and where can people find you, and what have you been working on lately?
Yeah, well, people can find us online at perfecthealthdiet.com. One of the things we started going on about 3 years ago now, we started a health retreat. And the idea there was that it can be hard to learn from a book. Not everybody learns from a book. And we'd create an environment where we would optimize everything. We would optimize the environment, optimize the food. We would teach you how to cook. So my wife has been, spent 10 years learning how to very efficiently cook really delicious and nutritious meals of the Perfect Health Diet variety. So she spends less than 30 minutes a day cooking, but we cook, that's enough to make all of our food for the week, and very inexpensively, and it's delicious. And, so she teaches cooking. I teach all the science of how to be healthy. We cover every aspect of how to be healthy, including lifestyle, environment, food, nutrition, movement. We have 4 movement classes a day. We teach, and every class is different. We do one-on-one assessments of posture, gait, body positioning. A lot of people have they're misoriented their body. They have things don't fit together quite as well as they should.
Yeah, and the anatomy is a little out of sync, right?
Yeah. And it's amazing how quickly, and most of that is just habit in the brain. It's actually the brain that drives it and gets you into that position. And with some simple retraining exercises, you can reteach the brain how the body should be moving, and people can move much more freely and feel much better very quickly. And so we do that. In the evening, we teach relaxation, stress relief. So it's very, very important to relax in the evening and have all your stress in the daytime. So a little daytime stress is actually good for us, but you don't want any stress at night. And, so we teach every aspect of health, and it's an immersive experience. People learn a lot. It's a lot of fun. They get free time. It's on a magnificent beach. It's almost private at the time of the year we do the retreats. Great weather, swimmable ocean. We've got, it's a luxury property. We've got 2 heated pools. We've got 2 saltwater pools. We've got 2 saltwater hot tubs. Really nice environment. And
sounds good.
Yeah, and people say, although it's a moderately busy schedule, people say it's the most relaxing vacation they've ever had. And they get very rested. They sleep very well by the end. People who come
and they're learning.
Yeah, and
they're learning a lot.
They're learning a lot. And people who come who are overweight lose weight. They and often they lose as many inches off their waist as they lose pounds. So it's not uncommon to lose 4 pounds, 3 pounds, 3 inches off the waist. So it's a very healthy weight loss, and this is with no restriction of calories. So we encourage people to eat, as much as they want, and try to calibrate it, so that they're just starting to get hungry at the end of the overnight fast, but to really enjoy their food and don't deprive themselves. And it's not
so nice.
Yeah, and it's not necessary to deprive yourself to normalize weight. It's just a matter of getting healthy and knowing how to live properly.
That's awesome, and that's so good to hear that you're doing this. And we need more people like that, looking very holistic, especially for weight loss, when there is a lot of talk about just exercising more and eating less kind of approach. And are you looking into expanding this to, I don't know, maybe in Brazil? I'm sure a lot of people would be interested in doing this retreat here.
Well, I wish we could, but actually we've had to cut back a little bit because my wife and I just started a biotech company in order to create a cancer therapy. And we're really excited about that. We think we're going to have a cure for cancer in 10 years, but in the meantime, we can't do quite as many retreats as we have done the previous few years. And well,
that's a good reason to not do it.
Yeah, but
working on cancer.
But we'll continue to do at least one retreat every year, and we encourage people to come. It's a great experience, and we really enjoy them a lot and love doing them.
Awesome. Paul, thank you so much, and congratulations for all the work that you do, and your book is really good. Yours and your wife's, right? I always like to say, because we're always talking on the media, so I think people sometimes forget about her part as well. So thank you again for being here with us today, and I hope to talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you very much, Bruno.
Thanks for listening to the Brazilian Health Nut Show. Go to www.brazilianhealthnut.com for much more information about how to burn fat for the rest of your life. Hasta luego.